A very good morning, students. Welcome all to the today's virtual class. Well, in this video we are dealing with the third chapter, that is internal control. Okay, so in this we are starting with the third unit, that is internal control. Okay, let us start the session. So first, it is very important to know about what is internal control means. Okay, so internal control, as defined in accounting and auditing, it is a process of ensuring achievement of an organization objective in operational effectiveness and efficiency, reliable financial reporting, and compliance with laws, regulations, and policies. So, um, in simple words, we can say it is a mean by which an organization resources are directed, monitored, and measured. See, it plays a very important role in detecting and preventing fraud and protecting the organization resources, both physically as well as intangible. Um, Internal control procedure reduces process variations, leading to more predictable outcomes. So it is very important for an organization, both physically as well as for intangible. Okay, physical in the sense it relating to machineries and properties. Intangible is reputation or intellectual properties such as trademarks, copyrights. Okay, so internal control system very plays a very important role in each and every organization. A well managed internal control system will leads to a better um, growth of the organization. Okay, there are 5 components of internal control system. Okay, so here that is control environment, entities, risk assessment process, information system, control activities, and monitoring of controls. Okay, these are all the 5 major components dealing with internal control. See, in this video we are discussing in detail about each component. Okay, so the first component is the control environment, right? So control environment, what is this control environment? See, control environment includes the governance and management functions of an organization. So it is dealing with the governance and management functions of an organization. It focuses largely on attitude, awareness, and actions, those responsible for designing, implement, and monitoring internal control system. So control environment um, is basically deals with um, the designs, implementation, and monitoring of the organization, that is internal control system. And here there are certain elements which are relating to a control environment. Okay, that is the first one is communication and enforcement of integrity and ethical value. So every organization should have its own ethical value. So here control environment is focusing on communication and enforcement of integrity as well as a ethical value of an organization. And the second one is communication to competence. So commitment to competence. It is very important for an organization to commit itself for a competent environment. So that is also deals with the control system. Participation by those charged with governance, then management philosophy and operating style, organization structure, assignment of authorities and responsibilities. All these things are relating to internal management of an organization. So effective management of all these things, ethical values, competence, and the governance of the organization, then management philosophy and operational style, organization structure, as well as authorities and responsibilities. Assignment of an authorities and responsibilities is very important for an organization. Okay, so here it has to decide to whom it has to give while giving authorities and responsibilities. Okay, so all this will leads to better control environment within the organization. Okay, secondly we have entities risk assessment process. So that is the risk assessment process. See, risk assessment process form the basis for how management determines the risk to be managed. So here, how exactly the management has to identify the risk to be managed within the organization. Okay, so risk assessment processes majorly focusing on the management of the risk which were associated within the organization. This process will vary usually depending upon the nature, size, and complexity of organization. See, every organization cannot follow the same risk assessment process. See, risk assessment process will be based on a nature, the size, and the complexity of business. What kind of business it is dealing with, what kind of organization it is, the size of the organization, everything will matters for risk assessment process. And each and every organization have its own risk assessment process. So this is also a tool which has been used, or it is also a component for internal control system. Okay, next, the third component we have is the information system. See, information system is relevant to the financial reporting objectives, includes the procedures and records which are designed to how the organization is maintaining its procedures, and how it is going to records its financial statement. All this will be covered in information system. Okay, so for there are certain things which were relating to information system: initiate, record, process, and report transaction. See, there is a standard set by the organization how exactly they have to move while recording a transactions. So there is a procedures to record or to maintain the books of accounts. Okay, so that includes the following: maintain accountability of assets, liabilities, and equities. This is very important. Every organization should have accountability for a thing what it is dealing with. Resolve incorrect processing of transactions. So if there is any incorrect processing of transaction, that has to be resolved as soon as possible. Process and account for system override. So system for see, for this also they have to have a proper system. Okay, transfer information to the general or nominal ledger. See, this is all dealing with the procedure what they are following within the organization with respect to information system. Okay, capture information relating to financial reporting or other events and conditions, ensure information required to be disclosed and appropriately reported. Okay, so here whatever the information they are disclosing in the books of account, that has to be appropriately reported. So this is very important for a organization. As I told you, auditing plays a very important role, and whatever the report prepared by the auditor is playing a very important role in fetching goodwill to the organization. So that's why all this internal control systems what the company is adopting is playing a very major role in management of a entire organization system. Okay, well, we'll move on to the next component, that is control activity. See, control activity includes all policies and procedures designed to ensure the management directives are carried out through the organization. So this is dealing with policies and procedures. Okay, there is a certain example for a specific control activity. Okay, that includes authorization, performance review, information processing, physical control, and segregation of duties. So all this is with respect to control activities. Authorization is like um, authorization with respect to the things whatever you are doing inside the organization. Performance review, so reviewing of a performance which has been done by the people is very important. Then information processing, physical control, as well as segregation of duties. So segregation of duties are, so they have to properly allot the duties to the respective individuals. Okay, this is all with respect to control activity. Then the next the last component what we have is monitoring of control. So this is the process of assessing the effectiveness of control over time and taking necessary remedial action. Clearly, if a control is not implemented properly or simply considered ineffective, then misstatement may pass undetected into financial statements. Okay, so this is dealing with effectiveness of control over time. Okay, monitoring can be either ongoing or performed on a separate evaluation basis, or on a combination of both. Okay, either it need to be effective for the system to work. See, monitoring should be effective, or else it cannot be the internal system cannot be effective. Okay, monitoring of internal control is often the key role of internal auditing. See, monitoring, as I told you, it plays a very important role with respect to internal control. Effective internal monitoring will leads to effective internal control. Okay, these are all the 5 components of internal control. Okay, so the first one is control environment. See, control environment is dealing with the governance and management function. Okay, governance and management function. Secondly, we have a risk assessment. Risk assessment is with respect to the like a basis for how management is determining the risk. Okay, thirdly, we have a information system. Information system is focusing on financial reporting objectives. Okay, then we have control activity. Control activity is dealing with all policies and procedures, right? Then monitoring control is with respect to assigning the effectiveness of control. Okay, so these are all the 5 important components of internal control. Then we will take up with the next concept, that is auditors record internal control system. So how exactly the auditor will going to record the internal control system which has been maintained within the organization. Okay, so here the right method and tool, auditor can achieve a better understanding of control and help management determine which documentation method might best serves organizational needs. Okay, so here also we have the 3 different methods of recording internal control system. The first one is identifying control. Okay, before documenting internal control, auditors need to identify them, right? So that is the first and foremost thing, that is identifying a control as well as considering a relevant objective and risk at the entity and the process level. See, here the control must reduce the risk to acceptable level but not excessive cost. See, why he has to identify them is to reduce the risk. Okay, so here the whole intention of this concept is to reduce the risk of acceptable level. Okay, so here there are certain 5 components with respect to this identifying the control. The first one is um, control environment. See, control environment, risk assessment, control activities, information and communication, monitoring. um, all these things will be done under identifying control. What we have discussed as a component: the control environment, risk assessment, control activities, information system, that then the last one is monitoring, right? So all this will be covered in identifying controls. Then the see, along each of this area, auditor can gather the risk and control information through interviews, facilitate sessions, survey, document examination, analytical procedure, and observations. So along with these things, he'll going to do all this things, that is interview, facilitate session, survey, document examination, analytical procedures, and observations. This also be used to have an to identify the control within the organization. Then we have control objective. Okay, control objective, in addition to dealing risk and controls, control documentation need to be identify control objectives clearly, right? To better understand the control objective relating to an activity, process, or a system, the internal auditor can refer regular compliance documents. So here he has to refer the regular compliance documents for relevant authorities including capital market regulators and central banks. Central control objective should be established mainly for operating and compliance elements and should address informational processing objectives. Okay, so here there are certain things how exactly we'll going to have a control objectives within the organization with these four things. See, completeness is with respect to what prevent duplicate posting by the system, how they can able to prevent this duplicate postings with which will usually occur while recording the transactions. Then accuracy, what ensure accurate data input, how they can have an accurate data input with the internal control system whatever they are adopting within the organization. And validity, what prevents unauthorized transaction, how they can able to prevent the unauthorized or transactions within the organization. Then restricted access is with respect to what ensures the data confidentiality. See, data confidentiality is very important for an organization, so how effectively they can able to retain the confidentiality of the organization within the organization itself. That is restricted assets, how they can restrict the access to the ensure data confidentiality. See, the control objective is focusing on all this four things, that is completeness, accuracy, validity and restricted access. So control objective should address specific organizational risk such as those relating to strategy, operational reporting and compliance. Okay, well, we'll take up the next one, that is documenting control. See, to document internal control effectively, internal auditor must undertake the flow of transactions, including how transactions are initiated, recorded, authorized, processed, and reported. Okay, auditor must also identify and document the risk within process, including fraud risk and including a fraud risk. Okay, and identifying documents the control that should be implemented to management to manage that particular risk. Okay, so documenting control is majorly focusing on like maintenance of records, authorized process and reported whatever they are maintaining the documents. Okay, so here the internal auditor must be able to determine which controls are necessary to the process, activities or system and the review in lights of risk profile and desired level of control. Okay, so here we have a different types of documentation which has been followed by the auditor. The first one is flowchart. Flowchart is so here auditor use the flow chart to describe the flow of activities within the through a process. So flow of activities, to describe the flow of activities they are using a flow chart through a process as well as the relevant documentation. The main output of a flow chart is a process map, graphical representation of event performed by a group of people. Okay, they can graphically represent the activities which has been performed by a group of people. Process mapping can help auditor better understand business processes, saves time on communicating and confirming business processes with management, identifying risk, control deficiencies and inefficiencies. Okay, so through flowchart they can get all those benefits. See, the next we have narrative description. See, narrative description as a name itself says, the narrative description narrate, they're going to um, narrate the process. Okay, process flow is in the written format. Okay, then the first one flowchart they're going to graphically represent the things, and second narrative description they're going to written. Okay, without graphical representation. Okay, they provide a useful supplements to flowchart auditing document by detailing existing practices and thereby minimizing potential misunderstanding. That means, compared to the flow chart, here they are minimizing the misunderstanding. What they are actually trying to explain through this narrative descriptions, they can easily able to um, explain it without any misunderstandings. Okay, then next we have internal control questionnaires. So internal control questionnaires, so here they're going to have a list of uh, answer to the questions relating to the identification and evaluation of internal control. Okay, effective internal control questionnaires documents comprises a careful, structured, logical sequence series of questions that helps management and internal auditors document process and highlights control gap, strength and weaknesses. See, this internal control can able to identify the gap, strength as well as the weaknesses within the system. Okay, that means they have a prescribed set of questions as well as the answer to that. Okay, with that they can able to identify the gap, strength as well as the weaknesses within a system. Okay, next one we have risk and control matrices. See, risk and control matrices link control with control objectives and related risks. They are designed both to document risk and control to facilitate evaluation of a design and effectiveness of control system. By obtaining an initial understanding of expected control in a process, internal auditor can identify a gap between the actual control and specific control objectives and risks. So they can able to identify the gap between actual control as well as specific control. Then next we have policy and procedure manual. The policy and procedure manual establish a systematic framework and sound guideline for a specific process and activities of an organization, facilitate effective implementation of business strategies on both a strategic and operational level. Then last we have sound documentation. Sound documentation, there are many techniques internal auditor can use to identify and document internal control. The best practice includes the use of flowchart, narrative description, internal control questionnaires, risk and control matrices, and review of enterprise policy and procedure manual and other relevant documentations. Okay, regardless of a specific method used, auditors should pay close attention to the control documentation process as they will rely on this documents when evaluating control at a later stage. Okay, so all this is majorly deals with sound documentation. Okay, control evaluations cannot be performed effectively unless all key risks and controls are adequately identified and documented. So documentation of the things whatever you have found in a process of identifying the risk or in the process of identifying the misstatements within the organization will be documented properly. That is a very important task for the organization. Either you can follow flowchart, narrative description or internal control questionnaires, risk and control matrices. For everything you should have a proper documentation that will help the organization as well as the auditor to have a control, effective control over the internal control and to take a better decision based on these things. Okay, so this is all with respect to the auditors record internal control system. How exactly the auditor will going to record the internal control system? So in this video um, we have discussed two major concepts. One is the components of internal control as well as the auditors record internal control system. Hope you can able to understand the things what I have explained. Okay, based on this video only we are going to have an assignment questions. Okay, thank you for watching a video. Have a nice day. Take care.